What if I told you that you can make yourself hallucinate without any drugs, no special equipment, and absolutely zero effort? Just don't sleep. That's it. That's the whole recipe. And the things your brain starts showing you? Way weirder than you'd ever guess. Okay, so here's the deal. Sleep deprivation hallucinations are one of the most bizarre, most documented, and somehow least talked about things the human brain does. Like, we're talking full-on visual distortions, phantom sounds, conversations with people who aren't there. And this isn't some rare thing that only happens to extreme cases. This happens to regular people. People who pull an all-nighter before an exam, parents of newborns, shift workers, truckers, maybe even you, and you didn't even realize it. And before you click off thinking, I sleep fine, this doesn't apply to me, hang on. Because what this topic reveals about how your brain actually works is going to mess with you a little bit. In a good way. Let's get into it. First, a number. 11 days. That's the world record for voluntary sleep deprivation, held by a 17-year-old named Randy Gardner in 1964. By day 11, he was seeing things, forgetting sentences mid-sentence, and thought he was a famous football player. He also beat the scientist monitoring him at pinball, which, honestly, iconic. So what's actually happening in your brain when you stop sleeping? Here's the simple version. Your brain is essentially a biological machine that cleans itself while you sleep. During deep sleep, your brain literally shrinks slightly, like 60%, and cerebrospinal fluid flushes through the gaps and washes out metabolic waste, toxins, junk, the biological equivalent of a dishwasher cycle. When you skip sleep, the junk builds up. And one of the things that accumulates fast is a chemical called adenosine. It's basically your brain's "you're tired, stop it" signal. The longer you're awake, the more adenosine floods your system. And your brain, trying to fight the overload, starts glitching. That's the science word for it, glitching. Real quick, how long does it take before hallucinations actually kick in? The answer is going to surprise you. Most people start experiencing micro-hallucinations after just 24 hours of no sleep. Not 3 days, not a week, 1 single day. Let me be specific about what these actually look like, because this is the part people don't believe until it happens to them. Stage 1, around the 24-hour mark, you start seeing things in your peripheral vision. Little flickers, shadows that move and then don't. Your brain is misfiring visual signals because the part of your cortex responsible for processing sensory input starts degrading in its accuracy. So you'll glance at a wall, and for half a second you'd swear something was there. Stage 2, around 36 to 48 hours. This is where it gets properly weird. People report seeing geometric patterns overlaid on surfaces, walls that breathe, text that shifts and rearranges. At this point, the visual cortex is essentially freestyling. It's not getting clean input from the outside world anymore, and it starts filling in the blanks with whatever. Stage 3, 72 hours and beyond, full multisensory hallucinations. People hear conversations. They smell things that aren't there. They hold entire dialogues with figures that don't exist. The brain at this point has crossed a line where the boundary between internal experience and external reality is basically dissolving. Now here's the thing that nobody talks about. You don't have to go 72 hours without sleep to experience a version of this. Chronic partial sleep deprivation, meaning you're consistently getting 5 or 6 hours when your brain needs 7 or 8, stacks. Every night. Like debt. And the cognitive and perceptual damage accumulates in ways that start mirroring what you'd see in full deprivation cases. A 2017 study from the University of Pennsylvania found that people restricted to 6 hours of sleep per night for 2 weeks showed cognitive deficits equivalent to going 24 hours with no sleep at all. And the kicker? They rated themselves as being fine. They had no idea how impaired they actually were. So why does the brain hallucinate instead of just shutting down? This is where it gets genuinely fascinating. The brain doesn't experience sleep deprivation as one big failure. It experiences it as thousands of tiny failures happening simultaneously across different regions. Researchers call these local sleep events, microsleeps that hit individual parts of the brain while you're still technically awake. So what's happening when you see something that isn't there? A small region of your visual cortex had a microsleep. It dropped offline for a fraction of a second. In that gap, your brain, being the obsessive pattern completion machine that it is, filled in the blank with something. And sometimes that something is a spider on the ceiling. Your brain would rather confidently hallucinate than admit it missed data, which honestly is both impressive and horrifying. Okay, real talk for a second. I want you to think about the last time you had a terrible night of sleep and then tried to make an important decision the next day. A medical decision. A money decision. A conversation you probably shouldn't have had. Because here's what the data says. After 17 to 19 hours without sleep, your cognitive performance is equivalent to a blood alcohol level of 0.05%. After 24 hours, it's a 0.10%, which is legally drunk in most places. You were operating legally drunk, probably driving, definitely sending emails. Now here's something most people don't know about. The specific brain states involved in sleep that relate to all of this. Your brain cycles through different stages of sleep each night, and one of the most critical ones is called the theta state. Theta brainwaves operate at around 4 to 8 hertz, and they dominate during the transition into sleep and during light sleep stages. This is where memory consolidation actually begins, where emotional processing happens, where the brain starts doing its maintenance work. When you don't get enough sleep, specifically when you miss out on these theta-dominated states, your brain's ability to regulate perception, emotional response, and reality testing gets genuinely compromised. The connection between what you see and what's actually there gets looser and looser. And what's interesting, researchers who study theta brainwave activity have been looking at ways to intentionally access that state, not just during sleep, but as a kind of mental reset during waking hours. There's actually a tool that's been getting a lot of attention in this space. It's a 7-minute audio routine built around theta brainwave research, and it's something people in the focus and sleep science community have been quietly raving about for a while. It's called the Genius Wave. I'll drop the link in the description for anyone curious. Worth a look if you're interested in this stuff. Okay, but here's a question I know you're thinking. Can sleep deprivation hallucinations actually hurt you? Like, are they dangerous? Short answer: the hallucinations themselves are usually not the dangerous thing. What's dangerous is everything else that comes with them. Studies on sleep deprivation psychosis, which is the clinical term for what happens when deprivation-induced hallucinations become severe, show that the experience is functionally almost indistinguishable from acute paranoid schizophrenia. Not similar, functionally indistinguishable. Researchers and clinicians in the mid-20th century actually used voluntary sleep deprivation to study psychosis because the symptoms were that close to a match. Paranoia, disordered thinking, auditory hallucinations, visual hallucinations, flat affect. And the reason this matters isn't just trivia. It tells us something enormous about mental illness. A significant component of psychotic symptoms may be rooted in disrupted sleep architecture. Some researchers now believe that many cases of psychosis are heavily driven by severe sleep dysfunction, not the other way around. Here's another one for you. There's a real disease. It's called fatal familial insomnia, FFI. It's a prion disease, meaning a misfolded protein starts destroying specific parts of your brain. The specific parts it attacks? The thalamus, the region that controls sleep. So you literally lose the ability to sleep, progressively, over months. And it goes exactly the way you'd think it goes, with hallucinations, dementia, and death. There are fewer than 40 families in the world known to carry the gene. I know that's a dark turn, but I needed you to understand, sleep isn't a lifestyle choice. Sleep is a biological imperative. So why do some people hallucinate more easily than others under sleep deprivation? Turns out there's significant individual variation.
People with naturally higher baseline creativity, which correlates with greater default mode network activity, tend to have more vivid and narrative hallucinations. Their brains, when the guardrails come off, produce more elaborate stories. People with certain temperaments also show what researchers call hallucination proneness, even under normal circumstances. They're just closer to the edge of that perceptual threshold. Sleep deprivation doesn't create the hallucination tendency in these people. It just removes the thing that was keeping it in check. And here's something wild. Sensory deprivation produces hallucinations almost as fast as sleep deprivation. Stick a healthy, well-rested person in a completely silent, completely dark room for a few hours, and they start seeing and hearing things that aren't there. Your brain requires input. If it doesn't get it from the outside world, it generates it from the inside.
This is the part that genuinely broke my brain a little bit when I first read it. There is no reliable subjective difference between a vivid dream and a hallucination from the brain's internal perspective. They use the same neural machinery, the same visual cortex activity, the same emotional processing regions. The difference is just, is the input gate open or not? When you're awake and healthy, the input gate is open and external reality overrides internal generation. When you're dreaming, the gate closes and internal generation runs free. When you're severely sleep deprived, the gate starts malfunctioning. It flickers. It partially opens, partially closes. Reality and internal generation run simultaneously. You're awake and dreaming at the same time. So what do you actually do about this? The research is pretty consistent. 7 to 9 hours per night for most adults. That's not negotiable in terms of what the biology requires. Consistent sleep and wake times matter more than most people realize. Your circadian rhythm is a precision instrument, and it does not appreciate being jerked around by weekend late nights. The deeper thing, and this is what a lot of the newer research is pointing toward, is sleep quality, not just duration. Two people can both log 7 hours and have wildly different outcomes based on how much time they're actually spending in restorative sleep stages. The theta and delta dominant stages. That's where the real work happens. Look, your brain is the most complex object in the known universe, and it is telling you every single night that it needs to go offline, run maintenance, and clean up the mess from the day. The hallucinations? They're just what happens when you ignore that signal long enough. Don't ignore it. If today's video gave you something to think about, and you want to actually try something practical around the theta brainwave side of things I mentioned earlier, the Genius Wave audio tool, the link is in the description, and I've pinned it as the first comment. It's a 7-minute routine, low commitment. People are genuinely loving it. Drop a like if this hit different. Subscribe if you want more of this kind of content. And go get some sleep. Seriously. I'll see you in the next one.